This provides you with an overview of where we're going to go from here. So basically we're going to go over several steps that lead to good instructional design. I mean, as we've reviewed so far within your textbook, the idea is we're trying to approach instructional design in a very systematic way. So we have steps to the process. So in the pre-assessment phase, the idea is we're taking whatever standards that you're trying to apply to create, for instance, a unit plan. In that unit plan, which is ultimately going to be our outcome, our unit plan then, we need to assess what students already know before we go in, because there's no point in drilling on redundant information because they're going to lose interest and you're going to have a harder time teaching. So if they already know that content, they already know that subject, or they already know that skill, you probably are not going to have to teach the majority. Now that doesn't mean that you don't still need to differentiate and teach the minority that don't have that skill to be able to bring them up to speed. It just means that we need to identify those who do and those who don't, and then differentiate our instruction to be able to meet the needs of those who don't and be able to move forward with the needs who do. So we're going to identify what they already know. Again, it's aligned to your standards. So we're starting with a global holistic view of what probably is going to go into that unit to build up that skill set, build up that knowledge base, whatever it happens to be defined within your content standards. And it helps you determine more concrete objectives. Well, what do I mean? I mean, it'll allow you to define exactly what is an objective for you teaching-wise and what isn't with that particular class at that particular point in time, or those particular individuals in the class compared to a different group of individuals in the class. So this allows you to write your objectives, which we already know they might have prior knowledge. Students might already have prior knowledge, so then we don't have to define that skill set or that particular knowledge piece or indicator because they've already achieved that. Or it will be objectives for one group and not for another if we're differing levels or different groups in terms of what they need. It allows you to tailor your evaluation and your instructional planning, so you know what target you need to hit in terms of instruction and processing activities, as well as what you're assessing, because you're only going to assess what you're actually teaching. So it allows you to then go and define what you're going to actually build into your summative evaluation. So basically, what's going to appear there in the summative evaluation for your students. So that ideally then becomes a marriage of what's dictated through curriculum, so what the ODE standard's saying for that particular area, unit, what have you, whatever you want to call it, and what you actually need to teach, because that's been identified through the pre-assessment. Again, it may vary by the individual, so we have to do varying assessment or differentiated assessment as well, because we want to be able to identify where any particular individual is, and we also know that not everybody is totally competent in every skill set. So pen and paper might be difficult for other people, whereas working with manipulatives might be difficult for others, or vice versa. They might facilitate their learning and their demonstration of knowledge compared to the other group. At that point, after we've defined how we're going to assess, so that's our end game. Then we can define how we're going to teach and what student materials will be developed to be able to get to that endpoint. So basically, we're going to develop teacher materials, we're going to develop the student materials towards a unit plan, and what your students need to do and how you will teach to those objectives that you've identified, those measurable ones that we're going to talk about. Then you're going to define the formative evaluation. So from what you're teaching, we're going to basically see how well your students are learning the content, whether they learn the content or not, Whether there's a discrepancy because something's gone missing or something didn't work when teaching, and how well they're actually assimilating the material ultimately. Then finally we can go to teach at that point. So we've done the pre-assessment, we know where our students are, we've developed the content, we've developed how you're going to teach it, and we're going to develop how the students are going to process it. So they'll go through, let's back that up a little bit. They'll go through processing activities. So you'll teach, you'll do whatever instructional component in whichever way that you're going to teach. And then the students probably will have some kind of processing activity in which they are attempting to apply the knowledge or apply the skill that you're giving them. So we're talking about those student-centered activities, either where they're engaged in discussion, where they're answering questions, where they're actively prompted by you, where they're building something, where they're designing something, where they're creating a semantic map of something, all those types of items. This in itself can be a version of formative assessment if you're actually going to grade those activities or you're going to provide corrective feedback through observation. Then we go on to the formative evaluation. So again, that shows how well you've actually taught the material more than anything else, of whether the concepts got to the students and whether they can apply that knowledge. So if they can't, if you find there's a discrepancy in the formative assessment, then guess what? You have to refine your teaching method, figure out why they didn't learn, redefine some new activities, processing activities, so they do learn, and maybe even reteach the concept. And then you'll go back, you'll teach it again, and apply formative evaluation to see how well they got it. And then you'll go back again, if it didn't work, and try again in a different way. That's the way it works. It's a cycle. So if they don't get it the first time, you have to keep going back and redefining your methods, especially as you're learning as a teacher. After we finally get through there and you're sure that they got the content, then you can apply the summative evaluation, which is a measure of everything that they've hopefully learned and more of a global assessment on those ODE stated standards that you were trying to meet. So those objectives that you defined that are clearly measurable.